Good afternoon. Welcome to the session after donuts. So good to see. I was happy to see that everyone was serving donuts out there, getting their share. So if you happen to feel the need to go to sleep, I don't mind. All right. So my name is Steve Rahi. I am a dedicated PFE for Microsoft. Have been working with Configuration Manager for 14 years, long time. Not as long as Wally, but definitely a long time. Have seen some familiar faces, so good to see everyone that is familiar and those that are new. So, full disclaimer as we get into this session, okay? A few things. One, I am functioning on about 2 hours sleep. So if I near the edge a little bit and wobble, you might be in for a bit of a surprise. So I'll try not to. There you go. There you go. The other thing, the reason I have a couple hours sleep is when I came to do my preparation yesterday, I found that my entire lab had crashed. So I spent the evening rebuilding it. So we're about 90 to 95%. There will be a couple of things that will not work. I'll point those out, and I'll work around some things. I still think we'll have a good session, so bear with me if things are a little bit slow or if something isn't able to be shown. Again, I think 95% will be okay, but bear with me on that. The other thing, so we've been about a week in Vegas now. So what I've noticed, maybe you have too, is that one of the ways that people show appreciation around here seems to be by tipping, right? So not to be outdone, here you go. Just kidding, just kidding. All right. So let's get started. So here's our agenda. Today we're going to talk about SCUP. SCUP in relation to Config Manager 2012. Now, SCUP 2011, System Center Updates Publisher, 2011 does fully support Configuration Manager 2007 as well. But it's really interesting to look at it in relation to Config Manager 2012, and so we'll do that. We'll answer the question, why SCUP? We'll talk a little bit about the SCUP infrastructure and some third-party catalogs, talk about some custom updates, all right? And so we'll spend the majority of our time just doing demos, all right? So what this session is not, just to be clear, is a deep dive into software updates itself. SCUP is a piece that builds on top of software updates, so the expectation of this session is that we kind of have a foundation for software updates itself before we talk about SCUP. And so we'll use SCUP to build on top of the Microsoft patches that you're accustomed to delivering to your environment every second Tuesday of the month. So that said, why SCUP? Well, obviously SCUP is an interesting tool because it allows you to install custom updates, things beyond the Microsoft list of updates. This is a capability that we've had ever since SCUP 4.5 came out, but it's a capability that I haven't seen a lot of people really leverage to the possibilities that it can be leveraged. Why? Only answer I can come up with is that it might seem to be difficult. It's really not, especially whenever you look at it in terms of the way we're going to do things in Configuration Manager 2012. It makes a whole lot of sense to start to look at the value you can bring to your organization by using custom updates. All right? Maximize your Config Manager investment, same kind of thing. If we can leverage Config Manager to do more than the Microsoft patches, do your internal patches, do some of the third-party patches like HP, Dell, and so on, we'll talk about in a minute. It just makes sense. Be able to use the unified reporting engine, the unified structure to deliver those patches. Another reason, I already alluded to this. Config Manager 2012 introduces the app model. We've heard a lot about that this week already. SCUP, in many ways, is very similar to the app model. Okay? So if you're going to be using the app model anyway, then why not take that knowledge, apply it to SCUP, and leverage it for custom updates? Okay? And then thirdly, broaden software update knowledge and capabilities. As you work with SCUP, as we go briefly through the console and a few examples here, you're going to see very clearly the structure of patches that you deploy into your environment, how they work, right? So you'll be able to understand kind of the engine behind the scenes, and that's very beneficial from a couple of perspectives. First is software updates. Second, because of the similarity to the app model, there's a lot of commonalities in terms of thoughts, approaches, that kind of thing. All right? So the SCUP infrastructure, we're going to spend some time on that. Certainly supports Config Manager 2007 and 2012. We're focusing on 2012. We're going to walk through the infrastructure. I'm also going to spend some time walking through the console. We're going to jump off of the PowerPoint in just a minute and start doing that. Okay? But in terms of the infrastructure, there is one requirement that really seems to be a showstopper for a lot of folks. Don't know exactly why. I know some of the logic behind it, but certificates. Certificates, oh my, right? It seems to be a frightening thing or a hurdle that's very difficult to come across. So we'll talk about those. In the example, we're going to use WSUS self-signed certificates. They're the easiest to implement, certainly the easiest to demo in an environment like this, but we don't have to use WSUS self-signed certs. We can use your own internal PKI. We can also use third-party PKIs. The complexity does increase a little bit as you go to those other solutions, so if it works for your organization, strongly encourage you to look at WSUS self-signed, but if it doesn't, then we do have those options. So this blog post that I put here is one that I did that shows how to build out, in this case, SCUP 4.5, but it works the same for 2011 with VeriSign certs. Okay? So if that's your world and you want to see how we take what I talk about today and apply it to VeriSign or other third-party certs, this blog entry would help you guide in that direction. Okay? There are a few requirements for the certs. There's not many. Okay? Certainly there will be a few more things you'll need to do if it's an internal PKI, but just you need a code signing cert. Has to be the private key where it can be exported. All right? Key usage set to digital signature and a length of 2048. Beyond that, it's pretty simple. There are a couple of other things that we need to worry about in the infrastructure. So, we'll talk about on the cert side, how do you deploy these things? What's some strategy around how you deploy these things and make it easy on yourself? Okay, because that's another hurdle. Getting these things out into the environment, and we'll talk about how Config Manager 2012 actually can help you with that. All right? Another piece of the puzzle is policy. So you definitely will need to make a policy change in Active Directory. Okay? The reason for that is because by default your clients trust Microsoft updates, but they do not trust the updates signed externally, provided by another source. In order to allow your clients to trust those signed updates, you need to enable policy that allows you to do that, and I'll show you that policy. Okay, we'll talk about, again, how you deploy the policy. We'll go through the manual. We'll go through some AD discussion. We'll talk about config manager options for deploying those settings. All right? So that's about all I want to do with PowerPoints. Let's go straight to the demos, and we're just going to spend some time navigating SCUP, and then we're going to spend some time talking about the setup of SCUP. We'll spend some time in the database too, because there are some interesting changes when it comes to the database in SCUP that, if for no other reason than knowledge of how this works, it might be interesting for you guys to see. So let's go through that. So I'm going to shift over to my demo machine. And again, apologies in advance for the high screen resolution in some cases and the strangely fitting VMs, but at least we have VMs that we can look at today. So big thumbs up for that. All right. So let's go to my 2012 server. So here I have SCUP installed right here. So this is the way it looks after you get it configured. Obviously, whenever you first install it, it doesn't look this way. It's basically a blank page. Right? But after you get it installed and a few things imported, we'll talk about as we go along, this is kind of the way it looks. So a little bit of tour around SCUP for a minute. So just like our System Center products and a lot of the unified field that we have around those and Office and so on, we have a ribbon that will change context as we go along. We have some action areas and places we can make configurations. First place to really start discussing this is in this node with options. Okay? So when you install SCUP, the first thing you have to do, obviously, is configure it. You can build patches all day long, but until you have it configured to work with your infrastructure, it doesn't gain you anything. Okay? So the options node is where you go configure this thing. The first place we arrive is in the update server. This is grayed out by default. So you have to make a decision whether you want to enable this console to publish to the update server, meaning WSUS, right? So just like WSUS will synchronize with Microsoft updates on the internet to pull down the list of patches, now SCUP will interface with WSUS to publish patches that you work on in SCUP so they're available in Config Manager. Okay? So you decide how to do that. So you're going to use this to publish it, and you're going to decide whether it's going to be a local server or a remote. So you absolutely can use this console on a workstation. In my case, it's all local, so I've gone ahead and made that configuration. You can test the connection. It comes back okay. All right, and then you have a question about what signing certificate you want to use. So if you have a third-party signing certificate or PKI of your own, then you can produce that as a file, browse to it, import it into SCUP, and then we will use that to sign all of the updates that go out to the WSUS server. In my case, I'm just going to use the WSUS self-signed. It's extremely easy to do, so I can just go ahead and click Create. And that's going to cause this to happen down here. I'm going to have a WSUS self-signed certificate produced. Now, there's some other stuff that happens too to be aware of. So in the mind frame, we're going to kind of go in and out of the console, talk about the infrastructure, kind of do all that together. But some other stuff that happened here, whenever you create the WSUS self-sign or whatever cert you choose, right, we will import that into your local certificate store. But then you have some work to do beyond that. So let's go look at that for a minute. So let me move that up. All right. Come on. Okay. Little scroll bar. Let me get this out of the way. Hang on. There. Okay. So let's pop into our MMC. Going to add the certificate snap in. And I thought about trying to have this already done, but I wanted to show you the process just in case. I'm going to look at the computer account, click Next, and I'm going to look at the local computer. So what you see here, let me hit OK. So what you see here is that we have our certificate stores, right? And they're all populated. So there's one that was added whenever I created my WSUS self-sign down here called WSUS. And there it is. If you leave it this way, it will not work. Okay? Because yes, this is the cert that you need to use in WSUS to sign the updates. But you also need to tell the rest of the infrastructure that this certificate is trusted for that purpose. Right? The way you do that is, in addition to this store, you have to add it to the Trusted Root Certificate Authority as well as the Trusted Publishers. Okay? Now, this is all in one. So once I do it in these two stores, we're good. If you had a separate WSUS server, then you would need to make these configurations over there as well, right? In addition, you need to do the same thing on every client. Oh, that's nervous. That makes me nervous, right? Every client deploying certs, it's not that big a deal. I'll show you how to do it, okay? So while we're in here, just setting up the SCUP server, we make it very easy. If you want to add this cert, just copy it, come over to this store, and now you have a paste option. So I've already done it. It's actually in here twice because of a couple of configurations I've done, which I'll show you in a minute, but it's already in here. So it's already in here as well, twice, okay? So I'll tell you why it's there twice in just a minute. But it's really easy. So once you get done with that, you're finished with the creation of the certs on your WSUS server. Now, you can publish all day to WSUS infrastructure, software update point, and consume these updates into Configuration Manager right now. But until you do this on the client side, it won't actually work on the client. You could deploy these updates to your client right now once they're in the Config Manager infrastructure. But the clients will reject all of these published updates because they don't trust the certificate that those updates are signed with. Okay? So let's talk about that for a minute. So in the world of publishing certificates out to your clients, you really have three options. One is manual, which is not practical, right? No one wants to go around and manually import certs into all of their stores. You have the option to do it in AD. So what I could do is just go ahead and export. Let's do it down here. I can export this cert. So all tasks, export. And here I'll just take the defaults. No, you don't want to export the encryption key. Just use the default type, right? And then I can give it a name, scup cert. And easy enough, I'm done, right? Export succeeded. So now I have a file that represents the certificate that I can then use to deploy to my clients who need to receive these updates. So how do I deploy it to my clients? Well, that's not too hard either. So this is where I run into, I think, I'm going to try it anyway, but I think this is going to be something that doesn't work. Let's go into my DC. And I'm going to go into Group Policy Admin. And so you can use group policy to deploy these certs to domain-trusted clients. If you have workgroup clients, you can't use policy, right? But you also don't have to do it manually. I'll show you that one in just a minute. So this is loading. Again, I don't think this will work, so we'll give it a second. I had some trust issues happen with these whenever I built them that I didn't have time to completely resolve before the session. So I'll assume this isn't going to work. I'll keep my eye on it on the right-hand side. Let's see. Yeah, it's not going to work. Okay, so I will ignore that. But basically, if you wanted to, I'll show you how to do it in the local policy. Basically, you would replicate it exactly in domain policy and just apply it to your OUs, right? So I can't show it to you up here. But on the client side, we can go back into our snap-in and add in local policy because it's done the same way. So group policy object editor, that's fine. Okay, so let me collapse this up. So basically under local computer policy, if I want to come under Windows settings, I can come under security settings, and then I have public key policy. And under here, I have certificate path, let's see. Is this the right place? I think this is the right place. Yeah, okay, good point. So I can't show you. So you can deploy it just in the domain. You can import that certificate file into your policy. You can tell it which store to go into. So the stores that you need, again, are Trusted Publisher, and then root are the names of it, right? So that will go into your client. It will load it into your certificate store. You will see it there. And that's why on my server, I actually see it twice, because I've done two methods to deploy this. So with your domain clients, it's a few clicks, and these certs are in part of policy, and they deploy, and you're good to go. Right? So now the clients trust the cert that's used to sign your pieces. Now, what if you don't want to do it in policy? What if the AD team is really nervous about putting anything in policy, so they don't want to give you that ability? Well, it's cool. You can do it through Config Manager, and you can use Config Manager even for non-trusted clients. So let's go over here and take a look at this. So this kind of leverages some of the cool stuff in 2012. All right. So if I pop open the console, let me move this over. If I pop open the console, what I've done is I've created a couple of apps. The first one is to import my cert into the root store. The second one is to import my cert into the Trusted Publishers store. Now, do you want to do this as an app? I don't know. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Very easy to do, right? You don't typically think of, at least I don't, importing certs with an app, but it's very possible. Very easy to do. You could also do it with a program, but since we have some additional functionality in the app model, I thought it'd be cool to show you this. So if we look at this deployment, or this piece that I've built, and look at the properties of it, let's see what it's actually doing. So if I go to the properties here, okay, so nothing real exciting here that I've set up. Everything's pretty standard. Okay, I have one deployment type. I'll get there in a minute. So content, locations, whatever, it's all here. So for my deployment type, the reason this is really interesting is I can go edit this. And again, here's my content. So here's my location. My program is just a batch file. I'm not going to do an uninstall routine in this case, just for the lab. You could if you wanted to, right? So the batch file, all it's going to do is go out and run a utility that should exist on all Windows 7 systems, and you could build it into the package if you wanted to for Windows XP or whatever else, but let's just go over and look at it. So if I look at, where is it? Where did I put my package source? Here, let me look. I forgot. $C users. Okay, it's on my desktop. There we go. So let me go here and here. So here is my package source. So my batch file for my root import is just simply a couple of command lines. So I'm going to run certutil and add it to the root store and point to my CER file that I put in my package source directory, or my source directory for my application, right? Then, just so I can do it and have something that actually indicates what's going on, I went ahead and copied a blank text file that said I'm done, right? So I could use that for my detection logic. And I know then that my system is installed with that cert. Now, you could get more sophisticated for sure. You could actually write some registry queries to validate that the cert's there, or whatever. But for this, I just did a file. And the same thing for the other one is just using this same batch file logic to publish to the trusted publishers. Now, oops, that's my text file. Now, here's a question for you. Why did I split this out into two separate applications rather than doing it as one? Okay, I'll let you think about that. But here, so we have it done. Same source directory is what I'm using for both. But with this, what I can do, which is really cool, is come back in here and look. Let's see. Let me edit this again. At my requirements. And notice now, if I edit this, I have built a custom requirement that says I need to check to see if the SCUP cert is in the root folder on my system. If it's not, then this application is applicable. If it is, the user never even sees this. It never runs, right? So using the detection logic, I can guarantee that I'm going to apply these where they're needed and really nowhere else, okay? And the same kind of logic is done over on the other one. So very easily, with a few clicks, this took about 5 minutes for me to set up, I have the ability to use Config Manager itself to deploy my certs. So it's just not that hard, right? Okay, so also, for my detection method, again, here's my flag file that I use. So the interesting thing, again, with the app model, with our detection logic, if I create this deployment type, and I target it to systems, and the cert is not there, then I will see this in software catalog. If the cert's there, my detection logic's going to find it, and it'll never even show up, because it's not necessary, right? So kind of cool stuff. You could take that and make it a required application, same kind of deal. It's not going to run based on my detection logic if we know that it's already there, which does kind of underscore you need to make sure your detection logic is sound, but it's pretty cool. All right. So that's the cert. So in addition to the cert, what else do we need to do? We need to deploy a policy change. Okay. So what policy change do we need to deploy? And again, I can show you in local policy. I can't get to my domain policy, but the same kind of thing, right? So if I go to my local machine and look in my my snap-in, I think I closed it. Let me open it again. There's one policy I need to make sure is in place. Oops. Policy object management, add, done. This one we'll see. So if I go under here, computer config, let me expand that. Administrative templates, Windows components, scroll all the way down to Windows Update, then change this view. This one is the one that I need to turn on. Without this, your client will receive these policies, will receive the software updates all day long, but it will fail when it tries to run because it's not trusting the key or the cert with which these updates are signed. if you turn this policy on, then now we will allow you to install an update that is signed by other than Microsoft, by your own signing key. Okay? So again, how do you get this out? Well, obviously, AD policy is one mechanism. Okay? But you may not want to use AD policy. You may want to use Config Manager. Well, we have options in Config Manager that are really cool to help you with this. So let's go look at it. So in this case, I decided to use compliance settings. So and you could do it several different ways, but this is just a cool way to demonstrate some of this. So if I look at my configuration item, it's going to check whether my policy is there, and if it's not, it's going to enforce it. So here are my settings. Easy enough. It's going to look for this registry value right here. This is the path for the policy. This is the value. Right? It's going to go look in my compliance rules and make sure that this equals to 1, meaning that this policy is enabled. If it's not 1, it's going to set it to 1, because we can do that now in compliance settings in Config Manager 2012. So as easy as building a baseline, or building a configuration item, and loading that configuration item onto a baseline, now, if you don't want to use AD for some reason, you can absolutely control automatically who gets this policy and is able to receive these things. Okay, so very easy. Is this making sense, guys? Y'all okay with this? Okay. The donuts haven't taken effect yet, which is good. All right. So let's actually go look at this on a client so we can kind of prove it out. My client's already compliant, but still, it's interesting to look at, right? So this is a Windows 7 client. So if I go into Control Panel, Config Manager, right? So here's my configuration. So here's the baseline. I can evaluate it all day long. It's going to go evaluate. Actually, it looks like it probably did that very quickly. Let's see. Yeah, very quickly evaluate it. It's compliant. Even if it wasn't compliant, it would become compliant after the evaluation, assuming everything's working, because we're going to set it that way. Right? So pretty easy stuff. Okay. So that's the infrastructure, kind of, as far as setting up the policies and certs. Let's continue on through the console for a minute. So in our Options tab, stay there. Okay. We have all these. We've already talked about them. So now we have Configuration Manager Server. Okay. So here, we can decide to enable Configuration Manager integration, which might seem a bit odd, because aren't we doing that by setting up this relationship that we just talked about? Yeah, but there's a little bit more to it. So SCUP 20 or 4.5 did not have this. SCUP 2011 does. And honestly, I try to think of a scenario where I would see this at play, and I'm sure there is one, but it doesn't really compute in my mind, because either you're going to deploy updates or you're not. But what this is to enable, there's a couple of different ways that you can publish updates, which you'll see in a minute. One is to publish updates with the full content, which is what you do. Whenever you're deploying our updates from Microsoft, that's full content. You're going to deliver it to your clients. The other way is to publish updates as metadata, meaning you just want to scan for it. You're not planning on patching it. You just want to know if the updates are there or not, compliant or not, right? So automatic is a third type, and again, you'll see that in a minute. The automatic setting allows Config Manager to look at its own data and find out if a certain threshold of clients actually need the update. And if it does, then it publishes it full content. If it doesn't, then it publishes it metadata. And you set the thresholds on the bottom part of the screen. Here. Okay? Trusted publishers, these are all the people that you trust. So these are the certs that come in from our catalogs, which we haven't talked about yet. Any proxy settings that you need, typically we'll just lift them out of IE. Advanced settings. So some of the different publishing settings you can use, whether you use different source paths. This kind of gets off a little bit in the weeds, so I won't spend a ton of time here. This one is interesting. So one of the challenges with SCUP in the past has been if you sign with an update, or sign an update with a cert, when that cert expires, the update won't apply anymore, right? But if you set this first option, which allows you to add a timestamp, then even after that cert expires, you can still deploy that update that's signed with that cert. So it makes it a little bit easier to manage. Okay? This one is really cool whenever it comes to creating your own updates. So if you create your own update, you're going to have to specify a source path where those updates are located. Or even if you create an update in the catalog from one of our partners that provide catalogs, you're going to have internet connectivity to go retrieve the content for that update. If you're in a disconnected environment, which I know some of you are, then you could go proactively download that content on behalf of SCUP and place it into a folder that you designate on the system, and then we just go query that folder and pull in the content from there. So kind of the same idea of update synchronization with a software update point. If you don't have internet connectivity, you don't have to reach out to the internet. You can provide it as a file. Same kind of deal. Okay, so let's move on. So other things in here, I'll come back to the catalogs in just a minute and walk through those. So we have publications. So publications are how we group updates together and publish them as a unit to our software update point. So this is a way you can kind of like software groups or old style update lists, you can treat them together as new updates get added to the update publication, then we'll automatically publish those new ones out too. So we kind of manage it in a nicer way. You don't have to use publications to publish the update. You can do it individually on the update. I'll show you that in a minute. Rules. We have a very robust set of rules that you will see in just a minute, right? You can have a library of rules that you can pick and choose from when you're defining your update. You can define your rules on the update. Again, you'll see that in a minute. But what does that kind of remind you of? The app model, right? So you're already going to be defining rules for the app model. You're going to be in the practice of doing that. So if you're already doing it there, it's a pretty natural translation to do that same kind of thing here. Okay? And we'll talk more about rules in just a minute. And then catalogs. So this is where we access and see all of our third-party catalog partners that we can interface with. So here's the list. So let me pause there before I get into the catalog and more on the update specific side. And actually, let me pause. So show of hands, I always like to get feedback. Show of hands, is this connecting with you guys? Is it relevant, making sense, useful? Okay, good. On 2 hours of sleep, you never know. Okay, so let's go into our infrastructure. So this is a change. So software or System Center Updates Publisher requires a database. All the work that you're doing in System Center Update Publisher is actually getting written to a database. That's no different than SCUP 4.5, right? We had a database in SCUP 4.5. But there are a couple of key differences here. One, you don't have to install a database server to use SCUP 2011. So how are we working with a database? Well, here's the answer. Let me minimize this, and minimize this again, and minimize the fourth time. All right, so here, let's walk the path for a minute. So if I go into my users directory, here, okay, here, I'm going to have to search on it because I'm not remembering it. There it is. So here, all the way down this path, is my database file. It is in my user profile. So what does that mean? If Tom uses SCUP and John uses SCUP, they're each going to have their own database file. So what does that mean? That means that they're each going to have their own environment. Tom is not going to see what John is doing. John is not going to see what Tom is doing. Right? There are advantages to that. There are disadvantages to that. Okay? So what if you want to go back to operating like SCUP 4.5, where you have a shared experience where every user can get in and work, right? Well, you can absolutely do that. There are challenges with that. You know, one user could affect what the other user's done, that kind of thing, but you can do it. So if you want to do that, then you need to locate this file in a common location and then go edit this config file. which is stored under the scup install folder. So it's actually here. Where is it? Here we go. So here's the scup config file in its native form. Right? So you need to go edit that. So if I open that notepad, let me see if I can do this zoom thing. Oops. There we go. So if I edit that, then you'll see this section right here. Right? So this section, setting name where you see the value c:\scupdb.sdf, that is not present in the default file. But when it is present, then it redirects every console that opens to go to this new location and use the shared database. So if that's what you want, very easy change. Just make it in the config file before anyone starts to use it, and you're good to go. Or you can do it later if you want to move the database to a shared location. Okay? So what about this database thing? So SDF file. What kind of database is designated by an SDF file? Someone yell it out. SQL Compact, absolutely. So SQL Compact databases don't require a visible engine, really. They do, but you don't really notice it on the system. So what's interesting to me always is to go find out what's actually in this database. So you can do that just with SQL tools. So I can go and connect here to my database engine, and connect down here to, database engine. What am I doing? Did I not go down far enough? Thank you. Yes. All right, so now I have my path already defined because I'd already put it there before. Otherwise, you would have to put in the path yourself, but right now it's already pointing to my system. In my case, I don't need a password, so I just connect to it, and now I can go browse at will all the tables and different things that are in the database and see all of the results of my work that I've done inside SCUP. Now, do you need to do this on a regular basis? No, please don't. But it's educational to know where this stuff is and know where it resides, so if there are issues that happen later on and so on, you can go and hopefully make some changes if you need to with the help of support in this file. All right? Okay, good enough. So that said, let's go back to our PowerPoint just for a second. Oops. All right, and that was the demo. Okay, so third-party catalogs. So we've talked a little bit about the infrastructure of SCUP. We've seen how SCUP is set up. Now we're going to start to get into the details of patching in SCUP. The first place that people start, and it's a great place to start, is with our third-party catalogs. It's kind of, in my mind, like DCM, or compliance settings today. Whenever you look at it, you see the value of it, but you're kind of left scratching your head going, okay, I have to build all this stuff? Where do I start, right? Which is really cool that we have the compliance packs or the config packs for compliance settings, DCM, and so on, to help you, if nothing else, kind of have a guidepost to show you how to do this. In the same way, if you don't really have an interest in using the third-party catalogs, okay, but they are a wonderful resource for looking and seeing how other people have actually used SCUP to build their own custom updates. Very big corporations. Dell is huge into their SCUP catalog. It's a wonderful tool to look at and leverage for learning, and others as well. So using third-party catalogs, inevitably the question comes up, okay, cool, I like what this does, can I customize it? You can customize anything. The question is whether you're going to be able to do it safely and without causing yourself problems. Sometimes the answer to that is yes, sometimes the answer to that is no. But as a general rule of thumb, strongly recommend if you're not the one in charge of the catalog, don't change it, right? Because when they update it, your changes aren't going to be known to them, and there could be havoc that results by doing that. I've seen it. One of my customers has done it, and it generates interesting phone calls, okay? So, but certainly use the third-party catalogs as a learning platform to know how to do this. It's no substitute for accelerating your knowledge of software updates in general, much less custom patching, using these. So that said, let's switch back into our environment and look at some of the updates that are there and walk through them. So back in our SCUP console, so you see our third-party catalogs. This is the list of them right now. I've gone ahead and imported all of these. So we have Adobe, HP, and Dell, right? Certainly I hear the request often for the number of catalogs to increase. Would love to see that happen. Don't know anything insight onto that, but I agree with you guys that it would be cool to have some additional third-party catalogs. But the ones we have are really, really useful already, again, for learning, if nothing else. So these are our catalogs, and I've imported them here. So if I want to add catalogs, it's a simple wizard. I don't have internet connectivity in here, so I can't retrieve the data, but you would see the catalogs here. You could add them to your partner catalog and download them very easily, okay? So once I have them downloaded, then I'm going to see all of the catalog data in our list of updates. So I can browse all my Dell, HP updates just by clicking through them, right? So notice, I'm just going to start with Adobe just because it's easy. I see a lot of descriptive data. Just by clicking on it, I have a good view of the summary pane. Really nice, when it was modified, whether or not it's expired or not, date published, what server published it, status, all of these different things. Okay, let me, again, for those of you in the back that might want to see that, this is what we're looking at. Okay, so nice summary pane. Also, we have some tabs on the bottom that will expose installable rules or installed rules. Okay, now, show of hands. Who has ever deployed a software update and it said applicable, but you looked at it and it was already there? Anyone? Yeah. Or you deployed it, it said successful, but then it came back and it said required. Anyone? Yeah. It happens sometimes, right? And so the engine that decides that is the installable rules and the install rules. So being able to look at your updates and see right away at your fingertips, what does it mean for this update to be counted as installed? What does it mean for this update to be counted as installable? Very cool to be able to see that as a tab. What I would love to have, and I've asked for it and don't have it yet, but I would love to have the ability to export Microsoft's own patches from our catalog and import them here and look at the installed rules. Don't have it, would love to have it. Okay, so this is that. So let's go through the properties of our update. Before we do that, though, notice all of these options have lit up. We have the option to publish directly right now to the software update catalog. You can export, you can delete, you can view the XML behind the scenes of how this is defined. So if you're a real XML aficionado, you love to read XML, there you go. You have the ability to duplicate if you want to. So that's an interesting option, right? If you want to duplicate an update and make changes to it, that is far better than making changes to a default one, okay? And so on. You can create new updates here from the ribbon as well. So I can select from the ribbon, edit, or I can just use my right click here, which is my preference, and edit the update. So very similar to what you're going to see, not exactly, not 100%, but similar to what you're going to see in parts of the application model. You see the definition wizard for the software update. So here at the top, we have, first of all, the information for the package. Now, this is interesting. When you define the package source, in other words, the source file that is going to drive the package installation, once it's defined and published, you can't change it, okay? That's just for some internal ways that we talk to WSUS and different things that it's that way. Here, we're going to have a download URL, so the place that we're going to go get this file. If it's a third-party catalog, it's going to be typically on the internet. If it's one of your own, it could be a file server, whatever, right? And then down here, we're going to have any languages that you want, any success return codes that are different if you want to interpret things differently than standard, and then a command line. So the command line does not include the actual file that you're going to run, the MSP, the MSI, the executable. That's defined above. These are the command line switches you put on top of those things. So with XEs, you can do a number of different things. With MSIs, you're restricted to some degree. MSPs, there's some other things there as well. But this is where you supply those. Okay. On the next screen, any required information. So the languages, the title. Let me actually blow this up if you guys want to see it. The languages, the title, the description, the classification, what kind of update, who the vendor is, what product it is. If you want more information before you install the update, what URL you can go to get that information. So all of this is required. Really nice way to get you more insight into what this stuff is. Again, very similar to some of the definition stuff you have to put on the application catalog or on the applications in 2012. Now we have optional information. So you don't have to put any of this in. You can if you want to. You don't have to have a bulletin ID. You don't have to have a critical or an article ID. You don't have to have severity, impact, any of those things. It's a good idea to do it. It just makes your experience better, but you don't have to. Okay? All right. Now the fun stuff. So prerequisites. So the prerequisite engine allows you, if you're, so this SCUT 2011 will allow you to build individual custom updates. It will also allow you to build update bundles, basically groups of updates that you want to treat as a whole. Okay? So if you're going to deploy an update and you know by the logic of the update that it requires another update be there first, then you can create a prerequisite rule that says, before this update can install, I need this other one. Again, what does that sound a lot like? The app model, right? You have all of this ability in the app model. Okay? Same thing for superseded updates. You can control superseded updates in a similar way and decide which updates are actually superseded from the list. Okay? And then here's our installation rules. Okay, so here, if you want to look at your installable rules, you have a whole bunch of different options. I'll show you some of the options for building this in just a minute. But right away, you can see just real quick how the prerequisite rules work. At the top, we start with an ANDed scenario. So if you have more than one prerequisite rule under the AND, then we're going to join them together. If you want to OR it instead, you can always change the operator or insert it later, that kind of thing. So it gives you full control of how you do this. And you have a number of different things you can do. You can have an MSI rule, you can have some processor architecture rules, you can have your own custom rules, you know, whatever it means for you. Again, I'll show you that in just a minute. Same kind of deal with installed rules. If you, certainly, you know, after we, before we install an update, we want to make sure it's applicable, installable. After we install the update, we want to have a mechanism that will go back and tell us whether it installed successfully. That's what the installed rules are, right? Again, what's the parallel? Back to the app model. So if you deploy an application in the app model in 2012, you must have a detection rule. Why? Because after you deploy that application, the very next thing it's going to do is use that detection logic to go back and verify the application installed successfully. So if you don't have a solid detection rule, you might look in the logs, the app enforce log, by the way, and see that the deployment absolutely thumbs up, it worked. But the very next thing it's going to say is, I'm checking the detection logic, and it says, no, it's not there by the detection logic. Now it rolls it to a failure. Same kind of thing that happens with software updates. Okay, so that's here. Summary, information, progress as we save it off, and that kind of thing. Okay, so that's the catalog. So now, if you want to use just the pre-approved stuff that's in the catalog, you can absolutely do that and enhance your experience. But you also have the ability to create custom updates. So now that, let's say that we've learned all about this, we want to now leverage SCUT to build custom updates. So I'm going to do an example that might be interesting. How many of you have iTunes in your environment? How many of you have trouble patching iTunes? Okay. So one of my customers does too. And so I'm going to show you how a Microsoft product can help Apple do patching better. Okay? So what I have, it's a simple example, but it's a very relevant example. Okay? I have a client with iTunes 10.3 installed. I want to move that client to iTunes 10.6. So I set up a custom update down here for Apple category that's going to drive that process. So I'm going to go in here and edit. And so here again, I show the MSI that I'm going to deploy. I show the source directory, which is now local on my site server. All of the other information about it that I want. Required information. Now it's going to be an update. It's going to be an Apple as the vendor and iTunes as the product. Here's the more information URL that you can display. Here's some optional information that I've chosen to not include some of it I have. Okay. Here's some prerequisites. I don't really have any prerequisite rules here. You could put them there if you want to. Don't have any superseded updates in the list. But here's my installable rule. So what I'm going to do is just come in here and look in this registry key and find out if my version, in this case it's going to be the minor version of iTunes, equals 3. You could get more complex than that if you wanted to, but since I have 10.3, it works for me. So if I have a client with iTunes 10.3 on it, this update's going to be applicable. Okay, or installable is the word now. So after I get done with this, I now have an installed rule that I can look at. Come on, click ahead. Oh, sorry. Yes, thank you. That's the 2 hours of sleep again. Installed rule. So here, again, I look at the same registry key, same value, but now I'm expecting it to read 6. So 10.3 to 10.6. Really easy to build. All right? Cool. So now I'm just going to go in here, and I'm going to make a change because this is already published out here. So I'm going to make a change and go back up to my optional information and just put in XYZ, whatever, in here. So that's an update to the version of this software update. And since this is one that I store locally, I don't need internet connectivity to publish it out to my SUP. So I'm going to go ahead and use this one as an example to publish to my software update point. So let's go ahead through this again, click next all the way through now, and close. Okay, so I've saved this, or it's saving now. So this is now updated, it's a new version, and I want to publish it. So I can right-click and publish it, do it from the ribbon, or since I have it down here in my publication group for Apple, it's already down here, so I can just publish it from here. That would be fine too. So, but for ease of use, I'm just going to go ahead and right-click and say publish. Now, here's my option. I can do the automatic, like I talked about, where you use the threshold rules. I can do full content, which is what you're typically dealing with when you deal with updates, where I know I'm going to deploy it, so I want to get all the files with it too. I can do the metadata, so I just want to scan for it, and I know what the environment looks like, whatever. I also have this option to sign all software updates with a new publishing cert. This is actually not a bad idea to do, right? Especially you're going to need, if your certs expire at some point, you're going to need to go back and re-sign them, manage that with the new cert so that they can continue to roll where it makes sense. Another whole piece of this that we haven't talked about a lot, really at all, is the management of your software updates, right? So as you produce software updates yourself, those software updates at some point are going to expire. So you'll need to manage your catalog as you have an update expire it, so that we reflect that in Configuration Manager and make sure you're managing your catalog appropriately. You know how that looks just based on our own updates, right? So that's an option. So I'm just going to click it out of habit, click next, and I'm going to publish one update. So off we go. We're going to publish it. We see the unique ID of the update so we can track it. So we're going out and publish it. Now we have one update, and I'll just zoom in again for folks that want to see it. We have one update that was selected to be published, one update that was revised. Because I didn't have because I already had this in my database, there was no reason to truly publish it again. I just updated it. Okay? So that worked. As easy as that. So with my citing certs in place, I can publish already to my WSUS or SUP catalog. Then with my certs in place on the client and my policy change, those updates right away can run right down to the client, and it's a very seamless solution. Okay? All right, so that's done. So let's go now to our client and actually see how this runs. Oh, one more thing. So this is actually, hopefully this will work. If it fails, it's going to be because I forgot to do this in time. So let me show you this. So in my list of software updates, now, you can see that I've published out, down here, when this populates, I've got published all of these Adobe updates, all of these Acrobat updates, whatever. If I look in here, oops, if I type right, and search for iTunes, then here's my updates. So the first version I made a mistake on, which is why it's gone now. The second version is the one that I just showed you, right? So you can see already, just from previous work I've done, there's one machine, my client, that requires this, and we're going to deploy it to that client. But if this fails, and I don't think it will, but if it does, it's going to be because I forgot to set this option, because this does take in this lab a little bit more than 5 minutes sometimes. I forgot to set this to 10 minutes, maybe in time. By default, this is 5 minutes for all updates. So I saw a couple of places where it failed just because it exceeded the time. So I updated this to 10 minutes. Hopefully it's taken effect by now, and we'll see the update deploy. But that's there. So let's go to our client then and look at this. So here, Windows 7, we'll go to Software Center. And first of all, big round of applause for the fact that we now can see software updates in Software Center. Yay. So glad to see that. All right. So now we see it. We're ready to go. It shows as available. It shows from Apple, and we're ready to hit apply. So I'm just going to install this. And so we're going to watch it. Let me zoom in. This will take a minute or two, for sure. So preparing to download. We should see it download in just a minute. And actually, the content's already there, so it shouldn't take long. But hopefully this will work. Fingers crossed. And then we'll see it go into the install. The install takes a few minutes, so it probably won't finish by the time we're done here. But I'll leave it running. And at the end of the day, oh, let me show you this too, just to prove it. Oops. So before the update actually starts running, here I have iTunes. Oops. Here I have iTunes. iTunes, give me an error. Continue, okay. And it is version 10.3. So if this works, it will be version 10.6 at the end of the day. So here's 10.3. So hopefully this will run. If it doesn't, it will run the way it is. I've just, again, had some frustrating experiences last night. So there we go. So I'm going to let this run. If it works, we'll see it, and I'll put it back up, but it's going to take a minute anyway. Oh, did I forget to do that? Let's see. Yes, thank you. Okay. So back to PowerPoint for a minute. All right. So that said, that's really what I wanted to talk about SCUP end to end. So if you do have more interest in this, if it's piqued your interest and you want to kind of delve into this, kind of refresh some things, Jason Lewis was a program manager with Config Manager for a while. He's now gone on to do other things. But he still maintains a blog where you can get some interesting webcasts that will walk you through how to do some of the things we've talked about. Some of it's on SCUP 4.5, most of it's on SCUP 2011, and it's a good resource. If you're interested in the VeriSign or the third-party certificates, then my blog, certainly I'll walk through that, and certainly feel free to go there. If you guys want to ask me a question, here's my email address. Don't hesitate. I'm happy to help you guys out if I can. All right? And other things here, there is a SCUP 2011 CHM file in the installation directory for SCUP. It's got good information to help you along the way, so don't hesitate to open that up. And also, just FYI, if you guys have questions, you don't have time to hang around today, I will be at our PFE booth in the expo hall tomorrow and happy to engage with you guys on questions there. So speaking of the PFE booth, come on by, register to win. We're giving away 5 copies each of 5 System Center books. So put your card in the fishbowl, register to win, and hopefully you'll get one of those System Center books. Here at the bottom is a number of PFEs are actually doing breakout sessions, and they will be at the booth tomorrow as well for added Q&A time if there's something that piques your interest about what we've talked about, or frankly anything System Center in general. feel free to come by, and we're happy to talk to you about it. There's other happenings going on at the booth, general demos, some client health stuff that we're doing at the booth, config manager, ops manager, that kind of thing. So I'll go back to the slide in just a minute, and we'll see if it ever finished up. Please complete your evaluation. Thank you guys for coming, and look forward to your feedback. Let me switch back over to the slide, and if you guys have any questions, I will hang around up here for a while.